Catus, Maximus here. This was originally going to be Performance Tool versus PowerTorque, the two PT tool brands. But it's more both of these brands actually against a variety of other cheap brands. Not Chinese stuff, but other brands that on the same kind of hardware store general price point. Now, another quick thing here about the PowerTorques is it's kind of neat to see the progression of at least the packaging. The PowerTorque used to be these GM performance parts on these PTs. Surprisingly enough, I have almost 20 years of packaging. I went by a kind of a smaller town auto parts, homegrown auto parts store, and they had a bunch of PT sockets. And this one right here is from 2000. This one's from 2010, and this one's from 2017. So you can actually see the progression of the labeling. And I've been talking recently in some videos about how sockets have been growing in length, and that's absolutely true here. We can see this 20-year-old PT socket is actually just a little bit shorter than the ones that came out in 2010. The other thing I'll mention is that the socket did get cheaper. This is one case where the PT tools 20 years ago were nicer, just a nice deep roll stamp, where they did get just cheaped out a little bit. But I did notice that they had these sockets at 25, 26, 27, and 28. So I got this icon set. I had this one odd 30 millimeters, so I kind of used it as an excuse to go around and do some set building. Let me get these sockets apart. The punchline of the video is that the PowerTorque sockets are going to be the ones that are, as far as like any hardware store type socket, besides Napa, of course, and a lot of their nice tools, is these PowerTorque ones are actually surprising. They throw a lot of steel at them. Let me get these all knocked apart. Getting those holders on these PT sockets are totally ridiculous. They're just some kind of clamp system. You're supposed to like cut through this hard plastic with a knife or something to pull out this clamp, and surprisingly enough, these things hold on so hard that you just twist off and it breaks that, and I gotta put it in here and drive it out with a hammer. No joke, this is totally ridiculous. I can't believe this is what it takes to get this out of the socket. Look at that. What? Now you can see that totally drove through that. Okay, got those all separated. So one way to start off with is that these PowerTorques are probably the only ones that are going to be better as far as like these raw large deep wells is going to be the Carlisles. I did get one 12-point, a Duralast here. This was $12. This at O'Reilly's was $11, and it's a much better socket. And I'll give you a quick hint. Is you can just see the finish of the chrome and the PowerTorque, and then look at this Duralast. Duralast AutoZone is totally gone with this. They're not Chinese, but they are super cheap. They just don't apply like the same type of base coating or pre-application on the inside of the socket, so the chrome just doesn't stick as well and doesn't give as nice a finish as it does on the outside. Where just a really nice socket, the whole thing will be just properly dipped. There's also a lot more steel. And talking about growing sockets, this Duralast is a little bit taller. This is just a little bit shorter. But the broach here, you can see where it just goes through. I would say it's a normal depth, maybe 5/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch. And so what I'm getting at here is on this PowerTorque, the broach is just super deep, and there's still just this whole chode of steel. So it is actually not as deep by almost 3/8 of an inch, or actually almost by 1/2 an inch over this Duralast. So technically the Duralast is a little bit deeper, but this PowerTorque is just awesome. This whole cross section of steel is probably almost an inch thick. So this is actually a really super duty socket where they just threw a whole bunch of metal at them. And all the other ones here, I got a 32 millimeter 6-point, and this is a 1 3/16. All both look pretty nice. And that was kind of my deal with these performance tools, is they also, if we get up here, they all look pretty decent. Now this one right here, this is the 28. This is their newest generation from 2017. You can see the chrome finish in there is not quite as nice, certainly not as nice as the early one. We know the early one because of the deep roll stamping. The early one just had a really nice shiny chrome in there. And as we went up through the ages, it was okay, but it started to get, see, this was that 2010 one, was this 26, and then on this 27 and the 28, which were made in 2017, they have gotten a bit cheaper. But surprisingly enough, that still looks better than this essentially painted on. That's it. It isn't painted on, but it's just such a poor interior finish. So that's a Duralast. This is a Master Mechanic. Master Mechanic ones, you know, they have those American-made Torque screwdrivers and hand screwdrivers, but man, the sockets from True Value really aren't very good. Here we have like the overseas Craftsman's, and it's, you can see the finish in there. It's like terrible. This is a 1/4 inch set of deep well fractional 12 points, so I had to order. Those are pretty rare. And then it had like some issue on the outside. So Craftsman sockets are just getting terrible. We have Ace Hardware, which the Ace Professional line used to be pretty nice. I don't know how they are now, but these Ace sockets, same thing. I mean, that really is a just a cheaper chrome plating process, and it really shows, and it's kind of disappointing. I even have some PowerBuilts, and PowerBuilt used to make some good tools, and now their name is just really not very good. And you can see this PowerBuilt socket's the very same thing, and that was disappointing because a long time ago I bought some PowerBuilt deep wells, and you can see how shiny these PowerBuilts are. And then you come over to this one socket that I replaced with the newer one, and this one I used to expand the set, and it's just kind of disappointing how so many tool brands have gone downhill. It's probably why Harbor Freight came out with these icons, is they said, well, we'll just make some expensive ones that look relatively nice, but to tell you the truth, even the chrome on these icons just doesn't have quite as deep a color and a satin finish as these PowerTorques here. But I got all these just to expand this set out, because of course they were 6-point, and that's how you get big huge socket sets. But really, it's surprising. So the PowerTorques now are cheaper than the Duralasts and are way better quality. Not just better chrome, but these sockets and their forgings are just, even though they're not quite as deep, they are super duper rigid sockets. It's just so much steel in the bottom of these sockets here. You just pick them up and they are surprisingly heavy. They feel like impact sockets, even though they're, you know, chrome thin wall, just because how stout they are. And actually, I really like that a lot. And then the fact that they're actually the better quality tools are cheaper. And I should quickly point out that the roll stamping on these is really nice and deep. They actually paid attention to that. And that's actually, as you can see, like on the Performance Tools, the Duralast, they're making the roll stamps much lighter, because then, of course, the roll stamp machines last longer. The stamps last longer because they're not crushing in the metal as deep. But, of course, you can't read them real easy. And especially when you start getting dirt built up in there. So, you know, O'Reilly's PowerTorque sockets really aren't that bad when you start stacking them up against all the other common competition. And that was kind of the whole point of this video, was to show you some, what I think is actually pretty good value, and the fact that they have a lot of these bigger ones. Anyway. Oh, I have a ratchet out here, the old original, which was OEM Tools ratchet. Some people had mentioned about fitment, and I was going to say, you know, for a big old 1/2 inch socket, that's not much play at all. This has a really good anvil, and I measured these. These are actually pretty tight broaching, much better than the Duralast. We should do that. Here's a comparison again. There's the PowerTorque on the anvil, and once again, this is a ratchet that has just a super tight anvil in it. We'll do the Duralast. And this Duralast, you can see, this thing is just all over the place compared to the PowerTorque, which is still pretty accurate. It's actually almost half. So even more, God, this is now, it has really deep undercuts for the ball detent, so it actually stays on the ratchet better too. Another added bonus. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.